Oh, yeah, Protestant church is completely woke.
Yeah,
they hang the rainbow flag on the church.
Yeah,
and some of the pastors are atheists. All of us have sinned more or less through our lives.
Yeah.
But have we made amends? You know, have we atoned for our sins? That's always been the Catholic way.
You know, that real love wills the good of the other. Mm-hmm. So it's not content with letting people be slaves to their sin. One of the biggest problems in our world, and I do tend to agree with her, is this loss of femininity, that the devil, the enemy, hates woman. Eve is created mother of the living. Mother of the living, what an honourable title. Mm-hmm. And here are women saying, we want to be priests. You're mother of the living. This is beautiful. Feminism has been a huge attack on the sanctity of the female, I think, and femininity.
Hi, Katharine.
Hi, Tammy.
Katharine Bennet.
Yes.
Katharine Bennet, she's a writer, and I've asked her to come on my podcast. We're at the art conference this weekend, and I've been blessed with a place to do podcasts, and so I've tried to take advantage of that as much as possible, and Katharine said yes to come on. So maybe, Katharine, I'll get you to introduce yourself and explain what you're up to these days, and then we can get to it.
Well, thank you for having me on your podcast, Tammy. I was really pleased when I realised we were able to meet today. So I've been writing for the Catholic Herald here in the UK for some time, and I have a background in education, so I've been teaching in secondary schools around London for over 20 years, and then gradually reduced those hours to fit in with my family as I was having children and to be available to them. And a lot of people said, when the kids are older, you can take on more responsibility and work more hours. And in fact, the opposite was true in a sense, because I thought, well, that's when they really need me. You know, the teenagers coming home, letting themselves in, eating what they want, watching what they want. And I thought, I just want to be available, you know, just
and you have to
there.
Be available, because you don't know when they're going to tell you something that they need to tell you, and you can't just say, tell me everything you need. You need to tell me.
You've got 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's not going to happen, right?
Exactly. So just that being available. So I was really seeking work that was a bit more flexible.
Yeah.
And I'd already done a bit of writing, so I upped the writing and then reduced my hours at school, and then I founded this. So I've worked in Catholic education, and we've seen a lot of the problems coming into Catholic schools that we see everywhere.
Right.
And it's a shame to say it, but there's a sense that they've capitulated also to some of the.
It does look that way.
Yeah.
Some of the Catholic schools, for sure.
Yeah. There are some great ones, but it is an endemic problem, and I think it's trying, because over here we have state-funded Catholic schools, so. It's very difficult because you're trying to, you know, in a sense, align with the spirit of the age and not upset people. And on the other, there is necessarily, I think, a conflict, because, you know, as Chesterton said, and I'm going to get this completely wrong, but we want a church that will change the world, not change with the world. And so schools, I found that there were some problems, and founded something called DICE, which is Defending the Integrity of Catholic Education.
I saw that, yeah.
It's just embryonic, yeah. We're just starting out. There's a few really good people, and like me, there's been governors working in schools and ex-teachers, and they're interested in what we can do to help bolster Catholic education. And because to some extent it's a willful attempt to undermine the faith, but very often it's just a lack of formation, a lack of catechesis, and teachers are so busy, and so they reach for whatever they've got, and they've got stuff coming in, critical theory and Stonewall, and because it's coming into schools, they're reaching for it as a resource. And so it's trying to offer that balance and say, actually, you know, in Catholic schools, you don't need to reach for those things, because we have the fullness of truth and the richness of our faith and our teachings just here. So it's trying to offer that. So, but we're just starting out. So that's where I am now, doing a bit of that, which is quite flexible, and then my writing. And we have our own little podcast, me and a couple of guys here, Gavin Ashenden and Jordan. No, that's your husband. So no, it's not him. Gavin Ashenden and Mark Lambert, who we have something called Catholic Unscripted, and we just have a weekly chit chat, a bit of apologetics, a bit of looking at what's happening in the church today. So. a few things. Yeah.
And how do you think the Catholic Church is doing in England?
I think that the church is struggling all around the world. Well, in Africa, it's the heart of the church, I think. But,
it sounds like that.
It seems to be. Although in England, there's far more decline in Protestantism, so in the Protestant churches.
In Canada as well.
Is it true?
Oh, the Protestant church is completely woke.
Yeah.
They hang the rainbow flag on the church.
Yeah.
And some of the pastors are atheists.
Yeah.
So
and that is the root of the problem. And Pope Benedict wrote beautifully about this in Jesus of Nazareth, which is just an unbelievably affecting book. And it's what you see is actually that loss of the sacred. It's the reason we turn to these sort of ideologies is because at the heart of it is we've lost faith. Actually.
So do you think that that's the reason that most people now have gone astray and gone in different directions is a loss of faith?
I think at the root of it must be.
I agree
why
with
that
you.
is, I think is a more complex question. But I think at the heart of it, Pope Benedict gave us the figures of Christ and Barabbas, and he said they're almost set up as sort of like opposites. So, and even the symbolism of the name Barabbas. Son of the Father. So here we have Christ and Barabbas, and in Barabbas I think it's like this will, this it's the self, it's elevating something of
the ego,
and things should revolve around the way I think the world should be. I'm going to fight for and then in Christ it's relinquishing to his will.
That's right.
And I'm a bit of a fighter, I'm let's change this, but I have to take stock and say I can't do anything without Christ. So I'm not going to change the world, but I can be a vessel to do what I can if I entrust myself to him.
Well, I imagine that your foray into publication rather than teaching was guided. And it wasn't necessarily easy. It couldn't have been necessarily easy to make that change. And so these changes that we make with God's will aren't easy. They might be easy, but they aren't necessarily easy.
Yeah.
They might be more difficult than anything else we may have done, but that doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yeah. And I think when you stand for something, you're always going to have enemies. If you stand for something.
I think Dennis Prager last night at the Energy dinner said that he knows that what he's been doing in the last couple of weeks was good because he's had a lot of people against him. There's definitely a sense of that, because life is difficult at various points. It's harder than others. Yeah, and you do sometimes find yourself thinking, why? Job, why is this happening? Right. Of course. And we also find in there the only answer that we can, which is, where were you when I created the heavens? Where were you? You have to entrust yourself to me, and that suffering will be turned around and will be for good. In God's time.
In God's time.
We may never see it, but I think we do see it. If we look really closely, we can see it daily. Yeah. But some of the things that maybe we're guided to do may take a very long time.
Yeah. Well, Saint John Henry Newman had that lovely phrase about some definite service. We're all called to do some definite service.
Right.
We may not see it in this life, but we'll know it in the next.
Right.
It's beautiful, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you said you taught for 20 years?
Just over 20 years.
And your kids went through the school system?
The kids are. I have older stepchildren.
Okay.
Yeah, and then my children are at wonderful. The only schools of their kind, I think, they're packed schools, which is parents and children together.
Okay.
So the emphasis is very much on parents as primary educators, and it's based on the educational vision or the vision of St. Jose Maria. So
is it?
Sort of Opus Dei schools, and it's very much about the human person and being created for a purpose, and that runs through everything.
And so tell the guests what the difference is between, say, a St. Jose Maria guided school and a Catholic school.
I don't
know, it might be a subtle difference.
I suppose St. Jose Maria is I'm a Catholic school. So just a simple practical difference is that a Catholic school is a state-run school.
Okay.
So the diocese has oversight over the school, but this school would be set up and have a governing body. So the members of Opus Dei wanted to open the school as, to not necessarily. So it's not just for Catholic children.
Right.
So it's not necessarily for children of Opus Dei, because our children are not members of Opus Dei. We're not. But it was more that vision he had of trying to strive for sanctity in our everyday life and work, which is Catholic. So I think sometimes there's a tendency to say, well, there's Opus Dei and there's Catholic.
Yeah.
Well, of course, it's all one.
Right.
It's one Holy Catholic Apostolic Church. So, but it's just with different charisms and different emphasis. So this particular charism, which St. Jose Maria brings, is just this idea that, similar to ARC, in fact, this taking personal responsibility, but the end point is for what end? So for what telos? So it's towards heaven. It's directing our gaze heavenward and saying, and the motto is to serve joyfully. So in the school, they serve with joy. They serve others. They think of others before themselves.
Right.
So in fact, I don't think there is a huge difference. It just happens to be that's the particular charism that.
Well, is the difference between, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, St. Jose Maria and the Catholic Church, is that St. Jose Maria, people can join that and not be Catholic, or it can be lay people that are Catholic, and so there can be lay people in there, but in the Catholic Church, the kids of the school, are they all Catholic? Pretty much? In
a Catholic school, that's actually right now a hot button issue. Because,
is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'm not completely up to date with what's happening, but I think there's something going through in Parliament, or there's an attempt to put a cap on the number of Catholics who can go to Catholic school. So it was always first place to Catholic children of Catholic parents who chose a Catholic education.
Right.
And then if it wasn't oversubscribed, they would say then they'd take in anyone else, of course.
Right.
But so you'd show that you've been baptised and you go to Mass.
Right.
But I think they're now looking to cap it at 50%. So 50% Catholic children and then any other.
Huh.
And
we'll see what that does to the Catholic school system.
Yeah.
It's kind of like multiculturalism. And if you bring, what we're finding, Canada's been pretty good with their multiculturalism up till the present time, because they've been careful with their immigration policy. But now we brought in 1 million people last year. And so we don't know what it'll take time to know what the outcome of that is. But it does change things when you bring lots of people together, that's for sure.
It does, yeah, definitely. And I think that there's a conflict that I know Catholics struggle with, because they say on the one hand, well, we're Catholic and we're universal and we welcome everybody and everybody is a child of God.
Right.
And on the other, we want to be exclusive and keep this to Catholic education. And I can see people tussle that, but I think my view is, and this is actually something Jonathan Peugeot spoke about brilliantly when he talked about the film Silence. He said there's a sense of trying to elevate the moral good above worship and sanctity. It's flipping it, and it's saying actually, man does not live by Judeo-Christian values alone, but sometimes you think it seems that way. As long as we act good and be nice and be kind, but if that means sacrificing our ritual, our liturgy, our faith, then it's not obvious that that is the right thing to do.
Right, it corrupts it somehow.
Yeah, it sort of becomes incoherent then.
Yeah.
So I think keeping the Catholic school for those who are Catholic and want to provide an education for their children in the Catholic school with the Catholic faith and the offer of the sacraments, why not? You know, because where will they go otherwise?
Yeah, right.
So
right.
I don't see that as exclusive or you know, rude or offensive at all. Anyone else is perfectly able to set up their school. Well, you have to have a high standard if
you want to obtain a high standard from your students.
Yeah.
And so part of that, I mean, as soon as you have a standard, you're going to exclude. So if you're going to have a high standard, you're going to exclude more than you would have if you had a low standard. Do we want to have low standards in the Catholic Church, or do we want to have high standards in the Catholic Church? So that's a question.
The idea of levelling everything down. And like in our catechism, it says equality does not mean uniformity. And I think that's such a simple but brilliant statement and observation, because you know, you are not the same as Jordan. I'm not the same as my husband.
Right.
But I am equally valuable and complement him as you two do one another. But that doesn't mean we're the same.
Right.
So this idea, well, we're all just the same, is actually very dangerous, I think.
Yeah, it is dangerous, and in many different ways. You know, with value, extrinsic value, instead of intrinsic value. If we are judging people by extrinsic value, as last night I think we talked about IQ. If we were looking at IQ, and IQ can be measured, and so people can be put in a scale of higher IQ to lower IQ. If we're going to actually make value judgments based on IQ, we're going to get in so much trouble. And so we have to be really careful of that. But in terms of faith, we have somehow relativized that. And since the Enlightenment, I think that it looks to me like we're seeing the end result of the decisions that we've made way long time ago in the Enlightenment. This may be the end of the Enlightenment that we're seeing. And so if we want to find, if we want to have an arc for people to find a way to ground again in, that has to be something like you're saying with the Catholic schools, of a high standard and keeping that high. But I can imagine that there will be arguments.
Yeah.
Because there's arguments everywhere. There's always arguments. So when you decide to write for the Catholic, how do you decide what you're going to write?
Well, that's a good question. Sometimes it's just inspiration. You know, really it is just an idea comes. Very, very rarely I'm asked to write something, and that's more difficult in a way because it hasn't come from me. I remember I was asked to write about Harry and Meghan a few months ago. And I really struggled with that article. I think it took me 5 or 6 days, and I kept starting and stopping because I think I didn't really know what I thought about it. I didn't have a particularly strong view. I think they're slightly annoying, and you know, but not enough that I really think I know who they are. Or but in the end, I think I made it about the, you know, again, the self-will instead of
God's will.
Yeah, God's will. But then other times I'll look at some things come up in the news, so and then I look at it from always a Catholic angle, and it's amazing how there just always is one, because it's a human story, isn't it? So
yeah, right.
Russell Brand, recently I wrote about him after that scandal, and it's not, in a sense, it's not really about him, so it's always, that's just a starting point. And then
I was supportive of Russell. I myself, when we were really sick, when my husband and I were very sick, I had a friend take me to an Al-Anon meeting, and I went through the 12 steps with her. Yeah. And I did notice that it's a helpful exercise to learn to be more mature in your choices and actions, and it gives you a spiritual foundation. It's non-denominational, so people are free to practice whatever kind of religion they want. Yeah. And that way they can get lots of people to join in. And it's been around for a very long time, and so it was good. And he's done that. He's been through that. And I think, well, if he's adhering to the 12 steps, he's probably made amends.
Yeah.
And he might be finding his way. And I would give him the benefit of the doubt that he's finding his way. I mean, some of us have sinned more or less. All of us have sinned more or less through our lives.
Yeah.
But have we made amends? You know, have we atoned for our sins? That's always been the Catholic way.
That's absolutely right, and you said it so beautifully, because I think sometimes there's a tendency when you speak about your faith and especially in the church, where there's teachings that we say are beautiful and that we try our hardest to live by.
Right.
But that's the point. We try our hardest, but we're fallen creatures. So
absolutely.
We're weak. We keep falling.
Mm-hmm.
But we have that. I mean, honestly, I don't know where I'd be without confession, without the sacraments.
Mm-hmm. I
was in France just 2 weeks ago before this conference, and we could only get to weekly mass.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to go to daily mass here,
mm-hmm.
and or go before the Blessed Sacrament when I get a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And not having that, I suddenly was very aware of the pressure of the world weighing heavy on me.
Mm-hmm.
In a way, I just could sense it. And I was saying my prayers and everything else, but when I got home and I was able to go to our parish church and go before the Blessed Sacrament and get to daily mass, there was that real penetration of grace that nothing external changed in the world around me. There's still the terrible conflict in the Middle East.
Yeah.
You know, all the difficult things that we see and the horrors around us. But I was changed.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think the difference was going to church then, as opposed to doing your prayers at home?
That for me, it's the real presence of Christ. It's the Blessed Sacrament that is so. You know, I reverted back to the Catholic faith from being a cradle Catholic.
Oh, I see.
And then I fell away
mm-hmm.
for a long time in my 20s.
Mm-hmm. Like most people,
it's
like many
common
people
story.
do. Yeah, I fell away when I was 13.
Yeah.
But it was a Protestant faith. But I fell away from my Protestant faith at 13.
Yeah, it's very common.
It is very common.
I had a happy upbringing of my experience in the faith, in the Catholic faith, and actually a very happy home life, and knew I was loved.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for that. And then, so I think the contrast because of that, then in my around 13, 14, my mum, who was the most devout woman,
mm-hmm.
she was such a holy woman.
Is that right?
And there were lots of people who weren't, but there she was, this sort of centre of my life, and she got very sick. In fact, with cancer, and it ebbed and flowed. But then, in the end, when in my late teens, it was metastasized, and she had brain cancer, and then she suffered quite a lot.
Wow, what a challenge!
I'm getting to the sacraments, but I'm going a circuitous route. So we were nursing her through her illness, and I think I'd already started when she first had cancer to fall into bad company, to make poor choices.
Right.
And so I was already slightly turning my back on God, and then her suffering compounded it. And I was praying, God, if you're real, look at this holy woman. She shouldn't be suffering. She needs to live. And what's interesting is, even though she was the one suffering, all I remember was her gently and quietly, she'd be praying the rosary and she'd say, I offer it up. And I didn't really know what she meant. I'd heard it. It's a very common thing that is in the Catholic faith we say. I thought, what's she talking about, offering it where? What's she doing? So there I was, angry with God. Come on. And there was my mum with the actual illness, peaceful and offering it up. And then she did die. And so that seed of anger completely took over, and I just turned my back on Christ and went the other extreme and began to disabuse Christians. I wanted, it was all around the time of Dawkins and Bennet and Christopher Hitchens. And they seemed intellectually, you wanted to align yourself with them. And I was young. And in fact, during that time then, I was really angry with the world and a God I said I didn't believe in. But obviously I did, because I was angry.
Yeah, so, that's right. Why be angry
God,
if he doesn't exist?
Exactly. So, and I was in Paris. My brother had moved to Paris. And I remember going into Sainte-Chapelle, beautiful, beautiful church in the centre of Paris. And it was just, it's stained glass windows all around. If you've been in, if you haven't, if you haven't, I hope you get a chance. And I walked in, this angry atheist, and I fell to my knees and started sobbing. It just happened. The sheer beauty of where I was had hit me. It was like a pebble in the shoe that had discombobulated me and made me, think. And I left there, and I wasn't instantly returned to the faith, but it made me question that, why did that happen? What was this penetration of this beauty in my life? And in fact, I started to think, oh well, I'll be a Christian then. Yeah, maybe I'll be a Christian, but I definitely won't be a Catholic, because you're not allowed women priests, and women should be priests,
right?
And they don't let gay people get married, and gay people have to get married, and all these things, the typical things, the arguments people have with the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And I was very blessed to encounter a faithful Catholic young man at the time, and he was such a wonderful witness. He loved his wife. He spoke about her in such a respectful way. They had a lovely family, and the family came first, and he prayed without shame. And so I was really moved by this, and I paid attention to him, and he said, look, before you give up on the Catholic Church, and the abuse crisis and everything,
yeah, right.
He said, why don't you just find out a bit more about it? Why don't you actually learn why women, it's male-only priesthood? Why don't you learn about the sanctity of marriage between a man and a woman? And I said, oh, okay, thinking, oh, it'll be nonsense. And really I was humbled, because pride does that to a person. It puffs up and sin tends to sort of puff yourself up, make you more proud. So there was a real humbling then, and I read the gospel. I read all the gospels and the New Testament, and even though you'd think I might have done that as a child or growing up in the faith, I really didn't. And the Jesus I encountered in the gospels was not the hippie dancing around Galilee that I thought he was, be nice to everyone, and he was actually at war with hate, with love, with hate. Oh my gosh, he was not at war with love. That real love wills the good of the other. So it's not content with letting people, be slaves to their sin. I wanted to free people from that sin and death. So the Jesus I encountered was really different to who I'd even understood.
How did it help you with your mother's death?
Well, so then it just completely transformed that experience, because from the intellectual journey, which was the reading and the understanding, and actually I think it's so beautiful that the arguments for the male-only priesthood is so beautiful and helps us to understand masculinity and femininity, and Christ as the head of the church, and that she's his bride, and marriage. That's so beautiful. So when I understood all of that, I then went before the Blessed Sacrament, which is back to the sacraments. And I went into the chapel, having the head had shifted, but the heart, I think, wasn't quite. For a start, I couldn't receive communion because I hadn't been to confession in a long time. Right. Some people would say you could have done. I didn't want to. I wanted to prepare myself, and I went before the Blessed Sacrament, and there were a group praying the Rosary, and I sat, and I just felt, and unless it's happened, I think it's very hard to explain something like this, but I just had this knowledge, this sort of certainty, first of God's love, and secondly that my mother's suffering was not in vain, that when she was offering it to the cross and saying, I offer it to you, do with it as you will, he took it on, and just like the resurrection, that her sacrifice was moving in my heart and my life, and it was not in vain. And
no, because there you were,
and and here I am, and
yes.
And my, the impact of that, my relationship with God, the children that we raise in the faith, the sanctity of our marriage. Oh, you're gonna get me crying.
No, I won't cry. I'll just tear up a little.
No, bit. I'm trying. I was sitting in there praying. I said, "Don't be soppy and start crying." But just it's so powerful. And when I think of the anger I had, and then saw what she saw, which is that this is not just talking, you know, it's not just talking to make us feel better. It's really efficacious in people's lives.
Yes.
That's an absolute reality to it. And generations are changed because of that suffering. Me and my children, their children,
right,
and our marriages. It's, you know, it's just a great gift.
How long after that did you get married?
So I had, during the years when I'd...
How did your life change, like, after that?
So, well, my life was a bit messy in the interim.
Right.
We talked about Russell Brand.
Yeah.
I wasn't quite that bad, but, well, bad, I mean, bad and good, you know, but it was pretty pedestrian, but I'd married soon after Mum died, and it was not a good choice of marriage.
Right.
Not fully understanding what marriage was. I was hurting, and I was alone, and I wanted to just be married because I was in a dark place.
Right, right.
All the wrong reasons to get married.
Hoping that marriage would fill that void.
And we were kids. We were in our 20s, and it was not a good decision for either of us. And he's a, you know, perfectly nice man, but so then we recognised that and went our separate ways.
Right.
And but because I was a Catholic, and you know, my family are Irish Catholic, and there's a sense in which we still do the cultural things. So my cousins will all baptise their babies and have First Holy Communions, but actually none of them are faithful Catholics. It's just what they do. So in that, because I was sort of in that place at the time, we had a Catholic wedding. So I realised that was quite significant, because then I needed to get an annulment.
Right.
So we'd got civilly divorced, and then I sought an annulment. That was a long process, but good to have it, because I think you want the church to say...
How long was the process?
It's about 4 or 5 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a long process.
It is.
They want you to think about this.
But you want to know that they're not just rubber stamping something, that actually they're really trying to see, was this a valid marriage? Because marriage doesn't end. So it's not whether it ends or not, it's whether was it valid at the time of making the vows. And they came to the conclusion that it wasn't, for the reasons that they investigated.
I see.
So then I met my now husband Phil, who had 3 children of his own, and became his wife, and he grew up Catholic and had a similar story of falling away, and we then found our faith together and raised
lovely.
Our children as Catholics. And what's beautiful is my older stepchildren and my husband's children. And I'm so blessed to have them in my life. I just love them to bits, and we've got a really good relationship. The eldest of those 3 is becoming a Catholic at Christmas through her own volition. You know, all we've done is try to witness. We've never pressured any of them, because it wouldn't be right to do so, but we've just said, we're going to Mass if anyone wants to come. Sometimes no, sometimes okay. And she's now coming into the faith, so that's beautiful.
Well, I think, and don't you think having your parents go to church is it's a guiding light. It's a guiding light for the kids, whether they decide to follow it or not. It gives them a chance to follow it. Gives them the option of following. If you hadn't been going to church, then that option would be even more removed and less likely. And many of our people in our society don't go to church, and so their children are far from finding their way there. And when you don't find your way to church, it's more difficult to find your way to the Bible and to faith. Personal faith.
I think so. Definitely, It's
well, Jonathan Pajot he's big on people going to church.
I think it's funny, because I think it's, on the one hand you can say, I'm not going to church until I absolutely 100% believe and know what and then I can go. And on the other hand I can think, well, to some extent that's never going to be the place you get to. You know, because it's not that kind of thing where you can put it under a microscope or dissect it and say, now I know the truth of it. And I think in the going, it's a bit like if you just take that step and go, because I'm a firm believer in the sacraments, and actually you're getting before Christ, and if you can get to a point where you actually receive the body of Christ, that's, you know, that really is, that's a very real aligning your, you know, it's like when you eat food, it sort of forms who you are. Whether you eat chocolate and trash or whether you eat healthy food, it forms it. We're literally the substance of our food.
Yeah.
And so the spiritual substance, we receive Christ, then it forms us in a real way. And I think sometimes people say, you can miss Mass 1 week. I'm on holiday, I'm going to sports. But it's a bit like if you're doing weight training and you stop after a while. If you don't maintain that, then you feel a real difference in your life.
Well, we've talked about this publicly quite a bit, but Jordan and I had a date practice from the time we were first married. Well, from the time our first daughter was born. And that would mean that we didn't answer our phones or email or did anything other than be with each other for 3 hours. That was the date. So we had ground rules. And we also had rituals where when we decided tomorrow is going to be a date, then you are obligated to be present and to show up. And so with that, you have to make sure if you're tired, you have a nap, and you have to have a shower, and you have to comb your hair and put on some perfume and get dressed in something nice before you go down. And then we would dance. And we did that for years. 3 times a week, twice a week, once a week as we got older. But we still maintained like this once a week.
Yeah.
And when we were very sick, we didn't see each other for about nearly 3 years. And we got back together, and I had changed dramatically, and he was still very ill. But there we were, and we thought, well, maybe we should have a date. And we thought, is there anything there anymore? Because we had just been on this roller coaster ride around the world. It seemed like we had been to hell and back, really. And we didn't even know if we'd come back to the same place that we could share. But we had a ritual, so we went and we said we were going to have a date. So we went and we showered and we got changed and we put on perfume, or I did, and combed my hair, and we come together and we danced, and we thought, there it is. Wow. And that was the beginning again of our relationship. And so this sacrament that you talk about, this is what I think, this is part of it. It's the practice of prayer, right? It's the practice. And going to church is a practice. Taking sacrament is the admitting your sins. That's a practice too. And there'll be times where a crisis happens and everything disappears. And if you have the things you practice, those are the only things that survive. And I know that now. I didn't know that for sure, but now I know that. It's the things you practice. So Jordan could still write because he had practiced writing every day. So even when he was super sick, he could still get up and he could write. And it was amazing because he couldn't even sit down. He couldn't, he was just in such pain, I guess, that he couldn't do anything, but he could still write. I could still do yoga because I'd done yoga for a very long time. I could still do yoga. And then during my illness, it was prayer. And so the prayer now sustains me. But also for a relationship, whatever we practiced in that relationship sustained the relationship.
That's so crucial, that idea of practice. It's incarnational as well, our faith. It has to be lived, it can't be talked about.
Right.
It's like you can know everything about tennis, every rule, every shot, but if you don't get on the court and play it, can you really say you're a great tennis player, you're the best tennis player? It's that incarnating things.
Yes, that's right. And this is the problem with top-down authority in our society is it has to be at the local. And we've been talking about the subsidiarity and having all of, taking responsibility for yourself and then for your family and for your communities and for your nation. And if everybody takes responsibility, then there's nothing left for these top-down people who are disconnected to think that they can domineer and tell you what to do. There's only a few things left, so they're not going to have much power.
That's so true. There's a beautiful Peter Kreeft. Do you know Peter Kreeft?
I've heard of him now.
I'm sure you have. He's absolutely
People
fantastic.
Are talking about him here.
He's just brilliant and writes beautifully and is so wise. And he speaks about marriage, and being so important, but also this idea of conscience, that as as our conscience erodes, he calls it cops and conscience, Colson's law, he says, the more our conscience erodes, the more pressure there is with the cops to take control.
Right.
So he said tyranny is a result of, like you say, the bottom, where we should be in families and have conscience and behave well. As the chaos then of that, you know, it falls apart and it's incoherent and the families are divided.
Yeah.
As all that division takes place, which goes back to the Garden of Eden, where man divides from God, man from woman, body from soul, and we're seeing the result of that now. Then you need that tyrannical pressure to keep the order, because otherwise the chaos goes too far. And so this is what's wonderful about this conference, is it's saying there's no need to live in this tyrannical way if we can bring it back to our own personal responsibility.
Yeah.
This priest I was listening to gave this lovely talk about marriage, which everyone laughed, because he wrote a paper called Marriage as Suffering or something. And he said,
fair enough.
And it was so lovely. In fact, I'll send it to you after this, maybe, so share it with you.
Okay.
But it was just a beautiful quote about, there's so many people trying to defend marriage, getting up and saying and that's good, we must defend marriage. But he said what we need is people who live marriage. We need both, but we also need people who live marriage, and the church is there to support people in marriage and recognise how hard it is, and it is hard. But we need them to trust the church and to go and let the church help them to live marriage. And there's not enough people doing that. So there's the defence, but then there's the authentic witness. Yeah. And I think ultimately that's the place we're at. We have all the right things now, I think, in terms of what we're recognising where the problems are. But then are we going to take that leap and say, you know, we have to really try to now live it? Yeah.
And in order to live it, we have to give up our ego as being the guiding force, because it's not the guiding force, it's the answering force. You answer. You can answer with your ego, but you can't dictate. No. Right? And so we have a lot of that, people trying to find their way through dictating what should be and what should not be, but
don't you think
that doesn't go anywhere good?
Kind of the masculine element, because I think what's wonderful about you, and I've loved watching you emerge, and your recognition of the role of femininity and the importance of femininity and masculinity, complementarily.
Yeah, and I think I do. Jordan and I talk a lot, and he confides in me what he's thinking about, and we struggle through his ideas, and I listen. I do a lot of listening, so I learned a lot, I think, through listening and through listening to him, because he would often read to me what he was writing to see if it was making perfect sense. But I left him alone to work, and he left me alone to work and to find what I was guided to do in my life. And we're very grateful for that in each other. And he says he's grateful to me because I didn't interfere too much, you know.
You just gave the space.
I gave him the space.
You gave the space. Yeah. And this is what Alice von Hildebrand says is one of the biggest problems in our world, and I do tend to agree with her, is this loss of femininity, that the devil, the enemy, hates woman. Woman is, Eve is created mother of the living. Mother of the living, what an honourable title. And here are women saying, we want to be priests. You're mother of the living. This is beautiful. And then it's mother who gives birth to Jesus. So the enemy wants to attack women. And feminism has been a huge attack on the sanctity of the female, I think, and femininity.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think even now we look at the world we live in, this emphasis on technology, and it's like, I think von Hildebrand called it a sort of cold masculinity. Actually, why don't we honour more the beauty of the home, the domestic sphere, the nurturing, the love, it's not that men can't do all of those things. That's not the point. It's not even men and women. It's
hospitality.
And hospitality.
So when your husband comes home or your children come home, there's hospitality there, so that they want to come in and they feel loved when they get there.
Yeah.
And that I would say that in my childhood, my mother was, she had some childhood troubles that were only told to us when her mother was dying. So it was never talked about. And often these things aren't talked about in families. But I never knew why she was kind of, well, you know, anxious about things. I never knew where it came from. And so her idea of hospitality was somewhat interrupted. And so I've had to learn hospitality. I've had to pray for hospitality. I've had to pray to find, you know, if someone's coming, why is it making me uncomfortable?
Right.
And what can I do about it? And luckily I was told through my conscience that hospitality is the answer. And as soon as I tried that, all my anxiety was gone. So all I had to do was offer service, offer the proper service to the people who were coming in, and things were good. And so, you know, disrupting the family means that people won't know how to do the little things that are so important, like hospitality.
Yeah.
And, you know, now people don't even have dining room tables often in their houses because everyone eats out.
Yeah.
That's been difficult, I think, to keep families together, is to make it so much easier. Or, you know, maybe though during the COVID tyranny, they had Uber Eats that would bring food. So maybe the mother isn't cooking, but at least maybe they're sharing dinner at home.
Yeah, yeah.
Because everybody was kept at home. And I thought when that happened, there's got to be some good things. At least men are coming home.
Yeah,
so maybe they can know their families again.
Yeah.
And women are coming home. I thought, well, at least everybody's coming home. I know it went drastically wrong.
Yeah.
But hopefully we can learn some things from that time, because I think the home is where we need to start from and come back to.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, we were talking about this, your producer earlier, before you arrived, about the COVID was awful, and all the tyranny and the lockdowns and being away from people and away from the sacraments. It was awful. Yeah. Although I did find an Opus Dei priest who, should we record this? I don't know. Who said, I'll be in this car park, and gave confession.
Good for him.
No one was. Yeah, good for him.
Yes.
Exactly, good for him, because he knew how important it was.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of bad. You know, a lot of terrible things. But like you, I always think whatever the bad, there is good to be found. So we have to look for it. And our family were together in a way that we try to eat every night together around the table.
Right.
And sometimes it's hard, and you've got phones buzzing, and we say no phones.
Right.
Our kids don't have phones anyway. But
yeah. Did you watch Jonathan Haidt's talk?
He was brilliant.
Wasn't he good? No phones. When did he say? He said a smartphone when you're 18, I think. I
think he might have said try to wait until maybe. He said middle school in America. Would that be 14? Yeah. But even then, he said maybe a brick phone. Yeah, he said a flip phone. I think the message was definitely
no
try
social
to avoid
media
the
until
social media.
You're out of school, though, completely.
And we've managed that with our kids. Thanks be to God. And they haven't hassled us. Because,
good for you.
Probably because of these lovely schools that I've mentioned. That I think it's again who you're with. You know that
they didn't allow phones at school.
They don't allow phones at school, and some of their friends have phones out of school, but some don't. So it's not. You know, they're not the only one. But during COVID, it was really lovely. We had puzzles on the go, and we were cooking together. Lots of puzzles. There's a lot of puzzles going on.
Yeah, lots of puzzles.
What, 20,000? Sure, we've got time. Yeah. So, and at the end of it, when we started to emerge into the world, my children said, you know, this has been the happiest time of our lives.
How old were your children when they went through that time?
They're teens now. They were... maybe 11 and 13 or 10 and 12.
Rough time to be separated from their cohort.
But they managed it really well, and I thought that was really moving when they said that, because I realised what they loved was just being with us. And we did talent shows and quiz nights and dressing up as each other. It's ridiculous things to pass the time, you know. And they said we just loved it. I thought, what a blessing that we've got young children who say we love being stuck in the house with mum and dad. Yeah.
That's really a testament to your marriage and your family, I would say.
And thanks be to God. Yeah. You know, absolutely. Thanks be to God.
My son had his first baby during the COVID, and he was living just down the street, so I was in his circle. But I was one of the few people who was in his circle, and so they wouldn't they hadn't shown their baby to anyone at the beginning.
Gosh, that's a hard thing to go through during COVID with your daughter-in-law and your son.
Yeah. It was trying, but I was thrilled to be there.
Yeah.
So
your first? Is that your first?
That was my second grandchild.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved my grandparents.
Yeah.
I thought that was the highlight of my life, to have them come by.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful relationship.
Yeah.
And
My
were they
grandfather
near?
was from Belfast.
Was he?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And my other grandfather was from Glasgow.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I do feel the British Isles are a good place
Yeah.
for me to be. I can feel it in my bones. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you been to Belfast since you've been
Just at the beginning of this tour, we stopped in Belfast first, and I went and I saw the house that he was born in.
That's lovely.
And where it was, and had my picture taken in front of it, which I'd always wanted to do.
Yeah.
It's been nice. Oh, and we went to there's an amazing place near Belfast where there's all of the cylindrical rocks that come up.
It's Giant's Causeway.
Yeah, Giant's Causeway. That's it. Wow, that was remarkable.
It is.
It's a remarkable place, and I was so grateful. You know what we were supposed to be? We were supposed to be in the Middle East.
Oh, really?
And then that didn't work out, so they booked Belfast and a number of other places. Right. And so we didn't go to the Middle East. We'll try to go to the Middle East when it seems like it's the right time.
Yeah.
But not right now.
No, that does sound quite amusing, saying we didn't go to the Middle East, we went to Belfast instead.
You
got your real pick of the holidays, haven't you? Belfast is lovely. My family are from just south of the border, and I know Ireland quite well. It's a wonderful.
Oh,
wonderful
so green
country.
there,
Yeah,
and we stayed
beautiful.
in an Airbnb that was just out of Belfast, so we had an amazing view.
Oh.
What an amazing place! The weather was quite nice when we were there. It was good.
What took your family to Canada then?
Let's see. Well, my grandfather, he was 16 when World War I began, and he wanted to go into the Air Force, and his mother went and put a stop to it because he was only 16, and so he went to Canada.
Okay.
So I think he just wanted to have an adventure, like young men want, an adventure, and so he took his adventure to Canada. So that's how he got there. My Scottish grandfather, I think their whole family went there, and I don't know much about him because he died when I was 5 years old. I was really, really young. Yeah. So I don't know why he went. But my grandfather, my Irish grandfather, was an only child. So he was finding his adventure of his life, and off he went. He lived to be 93 years old, so I knew him pretty well. Yeah. I loved his Irish accent.
Yes.
Yeah, I loved it. And in Canada, it was, it stood out.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I was in Chicago last year, and I hope we're going with Catholic Unscripted. I hope we're going again in April.
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of Irish in Chicago.
Yes.
And I met people from the hometown that my family in Ireland are from. It was amazing.
You could go to Boston too. There's lots of Irish in Boston.
I'd love to go to Boston. Yeah, one day maybe. I've
All
met a few people here from Boston.
Are Irish.
Yeah, all the police. Oh, the policemen. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. Well, I lived there in 93 to 98.
Yeah.
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 And I was surprised at how many Irish people were there.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had
big diaspora.
in Canada. We had Newfoundlanders come when the cod fisheries were fished out. All the Newfoundlanders came to Alberta, where we were from,
right,
for the oil and the gas and teaching, and and they had a Newfie accent. They had the Newfie sense of humor. They really improved Canada's cowboy culture.
Right.
So, well, Canada's such a big place.
No, I've never been. I really want to go to Canada.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge.
My brother went and my dad went. I never went, but I watch, programs about travelling around Canada. I think one day.
Yeah, go when the government changes. I would say.
I must say that is it's a bit off-putting.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't go right now. I can hardly go home right now.
It's really tough. Yeah,
yeah,
it does
it's really
seem to
tough.
be,
It makes me.
Yeah.
I'm not an angry person, and sometimes it makes me angry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's awful. What I'm seeing over here from what's coming. I mean, we thought we had it bad, but you're another level there with Trudeau.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not good.
Well, we may have 2 more years of it.
Really?
Mm-hmm. But we do have another leader, the Conservative leader, who is getting ready, and so maybe it's not time for him yet. So we have to be patient. But he's so low in the polls right now, Trudeau. nobody wants him anymore. Everybody, hopefully everybody can see. But it was the women that voted for him.
Was it?
Yes.
Gosh,
yes.
It's a bit worrying.
Yes, that's worrying. Well, women,
do you think they're still convinced by him?
If anyone is convinced by him, it would be women. Well, they don't really pay attention to politics much compared to men are more interested in the arguments and the issues. Yeah. And so I think they may have just thought he had nice hair and nice looking socks, and that was enough for them.
I remember when Trudeau and Macron used to be together, and people would say, look at them, they're such handsome leaders. And then Trump at the same time, they'd say, look at his orange hair and his terrible skin and his silly. And I thought, isn't this awful that we're reducing,
that's for sure,
politicians to how they, because Trump had a lot of good policies and there was stability in the Middle East.
I thought he was great.
And he was great. But of course he was, he was brash but you can hardly judge whether somebody's fit for presidency on how they look.
And
but
what do you want for a president?
I think you're right.
What do you want for president? Do you want someone who's brave and strong and forthright and outspoken, or do you want somebody who is not doing anything but just wants to appear like he's doing things? Like, that's not a leader.
Has no integrity.
No, none.
Just sort of, you certainly sense it's about the person.
It's about him.
Yeah. It's about him.
Yeah, that's all it's about.
Yeah.
Everything. He turns everything towards himself. He's a strange one, that's for sure. Yeah. But it's not just him, because we are finding, and this is another thing of falling away from the church.
Right.
That people are more concerned with their appearances, and that's social media too, and it's hard to find your way to be virtuous in this day and age, because we have so many temptations.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think you've used just the right word, virtuous, because that's what I think is the thing, is to grow in virtue and to grow in virtue and grow in holiness. And it's really hard for young people. There was someone in there saying yesterday it's quite hard when they're meeting people if they're young, because their photograph doesn't necessarily match how they look in the hall.
Oh, right.
Because at my age, I put my makeup on it, but I wouldn't know how to, do a shot so that you almost look like a different person, because we're so worried about our looks more than our character. It's true.
Well, and women often, they're very concerned with looks.
Yeah.
And because women look at each other.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah, we judge each other by our looks often.
We do.
But that's because men are looking at women. Women are just looking at the status of men to find out if they're worth paying any attention to. So so they have different status. They have a status, and we have looks.
Yeah, that's true.
Basically.
Yeah, I think that's
and so social media, it's all about the look.
Yeah.
So I think that we're very women can be victims of that. Young women can be victims of social media.
Yeah, definitely so.
And what it offers.
Yeah, for sure.
So how do you deal with that in your writing? Have you written about any of those things?
The social media stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose so. Maybe not directly, but working in education and having kids, we're always aware of how it is a pull on their attention, and how you have to grapple with that. I did write something a few months ago about my son getting lost when we were going for a long walk in a forest, and I was chatting with my brother-in-law going on ahead. You don't really realise where are the kids, they're behind.
Right.
And he'd gone a different path, and he has no phone. And we were saying, where's he gone? And I started slightly to panic, because I thought, well, what if it gets dark? And and everyone was saying, you should have got him a phone. You should have. And I said, no, we shouldn't have got him a phone. He's going to be okay. And then we found he was with a woman, two women who'd been walking their dog, and they found him, and they took him to themselves and said, we'll walk with you back to the car park. And I wrote about how lovely that was, because and specifically that it was women somehow, that actually that he didn't just go on his phone and everything was sorted with technology. He had enough wherewithal to not do the things to panic or go out of the wood on his own. So he spoke to these women and they directed him back. And I thought it was just a lovely example of just human interaction and
community, the importance of community.
Just and that he could trust that there are still people you can trust. You know, that not everyone has in effect, sort of horrible thoughts about what they want to do.
No, and that's very rare that there's anything like that. But because we have this thing that tells us about all the news in all the world, we hear about absolutely everything that happens. We don't have any perspective then.
No,
anymore.
and we're frightened. And and it's all very well me talking about the children, but we have to guard against it. I have to battle against that, because I turn to my phone and I'm looking, and then I'll get, like I said earlier, I'll get worked up about things. And you have to kind of step out of that, otherwise it can just eat away at you, because it's all too big. It's just so much bigger than us.
Yeah, well, it's not reality. People worry about Jordan because there's a lot of animosity, but the animosity is all online.
Yeah. Is there really a lot of animosity?
Online?
Online, right.
Yes, but not in person.
No, gosh, no.
No, in fact, I traveled with him in 2018 was the first time, and it was mostly young men that would stop him on the street, and I got to understand what men were like more, because I'd never seen that many young men talking to my husband, and they were so respectful.
Right.
And they would say, I don't want to bother you. I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah.
But I really want to just tell you how much you've helped me. And it was just beautiful all the time. All the time.
That's really something. And has answered a deep need in them, in those young men, that they are just not given in our culture.
Oh yeah, well, that's why I was so hard on Jordan, because he thought, what have I done? It's hardly been anything I've done for these people, and that was enough. That was enough to turn them around. How can they have not gotten even that much encouragement?
I know.
And that's our feminist school and our feminist society. Do you know Janice Flamingo? Yes, I've interviewed her a number of times. She's here at the conference.
I've
Did
seen
you
your
meet her?
interviews with her. I haven't met her, no.
Oh yeah,
but I
she's
know,
here.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah, well, she was an English teacher.
Okay.
But she had a feminist understanding, and in about 2014 she was teaching, and she was looking at the men in the room and realized, this is not helpful to them.
No.
And since then she's been going back through history and really looking at the historians, the mothers of feminism, and looking at their lives and who they were and writing about it. And there's a long string of resentment through the feminist movement that goes back really to the roots of it, and something that no one thought was the case, but is. So that's discouraging.
Yes,
it's discouraging. And now to know that the women's studies in university and social work and education, the social justice and critical theory and all the things that are in there are so destructive to people.
Critical theory has not just critical race theory, which has been absolutely awful and divisive and destructive, and it's swept over here after the George Floyd incident.
Now we know that George Floyd died of natural causes of his own volition.
But it was just an excuse because people were desperate to kind of release, and they're angry. People are angry, so it could have been anything else or anyone else.
It would have been something.
It would have been something.
It
was ripe for that.
But
it's right. It's swept over here and absolutely polluted our schools.
And
it happened so fast that they didn't know how to deal with it.
Right.
And the literature that they were sending to children was just horrifically divisive and awful. But you're quite right, we're just doing our young people a disservice. Young men have said to me, why is it the big young men desperate to make sacrifices? They want to defend women and look after them, protect, and they're being told, shoved down, and girls are being sent on STEM days and special programs to get them into medicine and business, and to try and rectify, it's sort of trying to right and past injustice, putative injustice, by enacting an equal but opposite current injustice. It's like it's still injustice, you know.
Yeah.
So these young men have said, when I was teaching, they said, Miss, you know, this, why give up? Why do we think they're playing video games and watching porn? What else am I going to do? You know, but when you then talk to them, especially, I mean, I was teaching religion about Christ, who's the perfect model for a young man. That definitely hits them in a way that it means something to them. And that idea, you know, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. People always get hung up on the phrase, women submit to your husbands.
Yes,
they get angry about that. But actually, what about husbands? Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. He was beaten and whipped and died on a cross for love of his church. And men have been asked to do that for women. That's amazing love and an amazing call to them. And women, if you submit to go under that mission, with your husband, who's going to protect and defend and keep you and the children under his ark, that's a beautiful vision.
It is.
That's a really beautiful vision. It
and
doesn't
to be
take
that
anything
support,
away from a woman.
And as a I don't know. There's nothing demeaning about being supportive. You know, it's something to be grateful for, that you can be of service.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.